There's this beautiful saying, I believe it may come from Sufism, but I'm not sure. It doesn't matter where it comes from because everything comes out of the one consciousness. So it doesn't matter who said it or what tradition it comes from. There's only one consciousness that speaks and lives through countless beings. When the ego weeps for what it has lost, the spirit rejoices for what it has found. So the ego, of course, is happy when something is added that provides the comfort. The ego wants things to be added to itself, which is quite natural. You don't need to tell your children, don't wish for things, don't try to get anything, because it's all ego. You have to keep away from that. It's wrong to want to add anything. Don't add anything. Don't buy. Or you can tell your friend, don't buy that car because you're just adding something to yourself and it'll just amplify your ego. Don't do that. Don't succeed, because if you succeed, your ego may get bigger. So don't succeed. Don't look for success. Okay. So the mastery of life, so to speak, is in you pursue life on this level where these things are fine. There's nothing wrong with adding here and there, not in an obsessive way, because that makes you even more frustrated, but improving your life, as we said before. And then, when these things happen to disrupt diminishments, rather than, when things happen that seem to diminish you, rather than things happening that seem to add to who you are, things happen that seem to diminish who you are, and that starts with a little thing, like losing your wallet. It's very small. Ultimately, on a larger scale, it doesn't matter, but it is a small diminishment, or when you lose your job, or something happens in your family environment, to your children, to any friends, at work, things, you lose your job, whatever, many things can diminish you, even an insult by somebody. You silly man. Are you stupid? An insult is a kind of diminishment to the ego. It feels as if somebody had torn a little bit out of you. And diminishments are one manifestation of being taken out of your comfort zone, the egoic comfort zone. And when it happens, because everybody sooner or later will encounter diminishments, you will also encounter the opposite, which is fine. It's part of, the two are part of life. You gain, and then you lose. When you gain, the ego likes to identify with it. Oh, look, I got that. It starts with little things. I just bought that. Take a picture, post. Now you can not only show it to 2 people, you can show it to 200, 2,000. No matter, it depends how many friends you have on Facebook. Look. So you can actually, once you know that this is how life functions, that the two are there, the two movements. And also you know that ultimately, because you're going to grow old, maybe the body will not function that well anymore as you grow older. And ultimately, you as this form is going to dissolve. So ultimately, as you grow older, no matter how successful you've been in life, you've built up your position, now you've got the big house, and you don't have one house, you have 5 houses. And you're really so established, you have your investments, and you have maybe a big family, and maybe they're all happy. It's unlikely, but who knows? And so you feel you really you're now firmly established in life. All the insecurities of the past are gone. Your life is totally secure, not only secured by your investments, it's also secured by your insurance, various insurances that you have. So nothing can possibly happen. You've got your huge life insurance. And despite that, suddenly or gradually, you experience diminishment. At some point, you don't work anymore, you retire, and then you sit, and that's the beginning of it. So the first thing that's been taken away from you is who you think you are. There's this guy or this woman or this man with this important position in life. And then all you have is the important position that you once had. And that's not as satisfying to the ego as having the important position. You can just look at your photos now and the trophies. And even your trophy wife, in the meantime, has become old. So that doesn't work anymore either. And so just when you think, I actually wrote that somewhere in a book, just when you think you finally arrived, that's the beginning of all the diminishments. It's not fair. But that's also a great opportunity. I don't know if you've been identified with externals all your life, and finally you arrive at old age, who knows whether that potential opening is still there. It could be, might not be. In some old people, the ego shell has become so rigid that there is no opening, and when finally disease comes or death approaches, it's when the crack that finally appears, it might be too late. You see, with some old people who become more entrenched in their egos, and others begin to transcend the ego. They become, the ego shell cracks or becomes more transparent. So you can see some old people are like, don't talk to me about life, let me tell you what it's like. And you mention any word and immediately they have an opinion, and they don't know it's an opinion, it's the truth. Let me tell you how it is. Doesn't matter what political party they belong to, it's the truth, that's how it is. Look at them, these fools. So you get more and more trapped in that rigid egoic shell. And then there are others who whether this spiritual background or not, whether they have already explored spirituality, when old age comes, they come to a place of acceptance, and then they become more compassionate, more loving, even more joyful. and something, a light shines through. And they become a little bit like children, but that's that kind of openness of a child that's not yet burdened with excessive conceptualization in their minds. That openness where you just are able to look at something and you go, you're not immediately imposing conceptualization on things and people. So I've met some old people in the 80s, 90s. I've met some old people. I said, I think I'm old myself by now, but in the 80s or 90s who go just shining. And many of them have experienced, they have gone through diminishments. They have lost things. And they've, at some point, whether through spiritual teaching or simply through life, they've come to a place of cooperating with the diminishments, cooperating with the acts of sabotage that life seems to inflict on you. And say, oh, there it is. Here's another one. And at some point, they learned even to welcome, say, oh, thanks, I just lost this. Whatever it was that they lost. Thank you. Fanta. Kissing. One realization came to me first when I talked to a Zen monk. I happened to see a Zen monk, and we talked a bit about spirituality and Zen, and he said quite simply, well, he said, Zen is really quite simple. It's you stop thinking. I had expected a more complicated answer, but then I realized that's actually happened to me. I stopped thinking, especially overthinking. I could still think, and some thinking, of course, still happened, but there were long stretches where there was just a very peaceful awareness. And there was, then what was building up was, out of that awareness came a deep joy. And that was very strange. Sometimes the joy was so intense that it was incredible, and I was just sat there whoever on a bench in a park for long periods. That really is what's called bliss. And it's just, that intensity of bliss that I had for 2 or 3 years, I don't seem to have anymore. I have peace. But the intensity of bliss, now I don't know what, it could be that when you get used to something, it doesn't stand out that much anymore and it becomes quite normal. And perhaps I experience is at bliss because there was still the contrast. I remember my previous state of consciousness, and then I was that one. Who knows? But this is the main teaching then. All spiritual teachings come down to this. Consciousness has to be rescued from where it's been. Consciousness has been kidnapped by thought. It's trapped in that, and this is your task, is to free consciousness from where it's been trapped in involuntary, compulsive thinking. That's always thinking that is imbued, you identify with, imbued, so every thought is imbued with a sense of self. So that's the spiritual practice, is that the stepping out of the movement of thought so that I is no longer confused with the movement of thought. That would be the surface I. So the cessation of thought, and when you practice present moment awareness and make that the central focus of your life, whether you are active or passive in that moment, it doesn't matter. If you are active, you give your attention to the doing, you honor it, you give it attention so that it doesn't become stressful. That sounds almost impossible, I know, to many people. If you give your fullest attention to the doing, it's not really stressful unless your mind projects itself to some future point, or your mind, while you're doing something, thinks of several other things that you really should be doing also at the same time. Of course you can't, you can only do one thing at a time. Another definition of Zen that the master gave is, Zen is doing one thing at a time. That's too simple, isn't it? Too simple. So you give, if it's doing, you give your attention to it. Then, as I said yesterday, high quality. It is of high quality. If inspiration is helpful in that particular activity, it will flow into what you do, because you're connected with the unconditioned consciousness, the presence. With some doings, you don't need any inspiration, you just need to get it done. You do the dishes or whatever it is, you don't need particular inspiration. Although while you do it in a place of giving it your attention, honor it, rather than do something but would rather not be doing it, but I'm doing it anyway. That's how many people live all the time. If you have a work situation where you work for your daily work, you need to decide, is it possible to honor the work that I'm doing, or even if it's something simple and may not be what I ultimately want to be doing, but right now I need to honor the present moment. Whatever it is, in whatever form it arises, it's my responsibility is to honor life by honoring the present moment. And if your work situation is so dysfunctional that the environment in which you work, for example, or the kind of work that is demanded of you, maybe what is perhaps conventionally called soul destroying, so that this is not a work that you could do and honor it because it's just very unpleasant. If it's that kind of thing, then you need to remove yourself from that situation. Even though you may be stepping into uncertainty, you cannot remain in a toxic situation like that, where the honoring of what you do seems impossible, because, for example, you might be surrounded by people who are in very negative states. There are many situations like that. But in other situations, you may be able to say, okay, this is not the ultimate thing that I want to be doing, but for right now, this is what I'm doing, and I'm able to honor and I do it carefully and consciously. So only you can know whether you're able to do that, or whether you need to remove yourself from that situation in order to seek something else that is more compatible, that is compatible with presence. Many things are compatible with presence, and quite a few other things are not. So when your attention is in the present moment, let's say now we've been talking about activity, then there are other many moments when you're not actively doing something, you're just sitting somewhere or standing somewhere or walking, and that is a more kind of passive state of presence, and that's very important too. Are you the observing presence at this moment, as you're sitting on a plane, looking out of the window, or looking at the aisle if you don't have a window seat, and you're sitting there. Now you might say, well, this environment on a plane, maybe you don't have a window seat. It's not particularly inspiring, and after you've looked at it for a few minutes, you say, okay, what else is there to look at? Nothing. And then you might drift off into something else. So it's important to realize there's not just present moment awareness, is not just the awareness of what is around you. It is more fundamentally the awareness of yourself in that moment. So your environment does not need to be particularly interesting. And if it's not interesting, like as it would be if you're going out into nature, there's wonders are all around you. But if it's not particularly interesting, like you're sitting on a plane or on a bus or wherever, or at the airport, then direct your attention to yourself. This is the essential part, the deeper part of being present, is to be consciously, to realize that you are, not to realize who you are, but to realize that you are, and that is the sense of beingness or presence, present within. When you are conscious of your surroundings, you're present without. Then being conscious of yourself as the presence, being present within, one could say. The Greek philosopher Epictetus, roughly 2,000 years ago, said, now here comes another quote, make sure I can remember it. He said, drama happens when fools come face to face with the difficulties of life, life's difficulties. Drama happens when fools encounter difficulties. What does that mean? It means the way in which you react to the situation, the so-called difficulty, amplifies the situation and transforms it into drama. And then you can't stop thinking and talking about it, and you become more and more emotional. And you cannot separate the situation from your reaction to the situation. They become one. You don't know that your reaction is what makes it really bad. It's a challenge externally, yes, but does it need to become drama? And some people live in such a state that they're almost, because they've lived like that all their lives, they're almost waiting for the next thing to go wrong. And it usually does. There's something that becomes part of the ego, that is, it thrives on the drama. To the ego, the false self, drama is good. It wouldn't explicitly say that, but it does everything to have more of it. It loves it because it gets much stronger in drama. Drama implies, in most cases, that you are right, the others are wrong. You are fighting the world in the form of other people. Yeah. Now, without that, does it mean now what is your life minus the drama? What is left of your life minus the drama? Says the ego. And then they ask, are we still in a relationship? We haven't been fighting for 3 months. Do we even have a relationship? Is there something wrong here? Am I really alive? I haven't been in emotional pain in a long time. Now, of course, it could be that you have deadened yourself to emotional pain. You don't want to feel it anymore. That's a totally different matter. You're not free. And sooner or later it will emerge again. And even here, how do you experience this situation? How do you experience this moment? How do you experience the totality of this retreat, which in terms of time lasts for a number of days? I don't know how many, maybe 5, 6. It lasts a number of days. How do you experience the totality of this situation? And a lot of that depends on the state of consciousness in which you meet this situation, the retreat. And that's an important fact to remember, to be aware of. So, although you're now in an unusual environment, you have left your familiar home environment, and you're now in an unusual, for many of you, a different country, and the retreat situation itself, it's all very unusual. So you've left all the familiarity behind, and here's something totally new. However, the question is, how much of yourself is still there? How much of the baggage, the inner baggage, you've carried with you? The baggage, which is the conditioning, the mental emotional conditioning, that determined your life experience up to this point. As the old saying goes, wherever you go, there you are. And so you're here, yes, in a totally unfamiliar environment, but then the conditioned self, how much of it is still here, and determines the way in which you experience this new situation. So if there are certain very deep conditioned patterns in your mental emotional field, then you will experience this situation in a very similar way to which you experience your life in your familiar environment. Simple example, if you get angry easily when you're faced with certain even minor situations, then it's safe to predict that you will encounter situations during this retreat that make you angry. And your ego, which is the sum total of the conditioning that you don't recognize, the unobserved mind, if it is the case, your ego, in this case, I've just taken anger as an example, in which case the anger has become an important part of your egoic identity. And since it is an important part of your egoic identity, it's actually waiting for the next thing to make you angry. Because that's its food. In certain extreme cases, you can see it in people when you look into their eyes, those who are very, very heavily conditioned by an underlying angry mental emotional energy field. When you look into their eyes, what is looking through their eyes is not really the human being, because the human being, the being behind the human, in other words, is asleep. It's the unconscious state. So what you're seeing there is the conditioned human entity. Because I don't know if the way I interpret human being is the human is the conditioned you, the person, the personality, the conditioned entity. The being is the transcendent you. This is where we are going into during this retreat. But the human of you is then part of its identity, or the egoic identity, is the anger. So when you look into the person's eyes who carries this pattern to a heightened degree, then you can see that what is looking back at you is a raw emotion. Or somebody who is very suspicious of other people. And this emotional entity that has taken possession of this person is just waiting for the next trigger. And it is hoping unconsciously that you will provide the next trigger. And if you detect that in another person, it's unlikely that a person who is so unconscious is actually here, part of our group. Very, very unlikely, because probably your angry ego would not have even allowed you or even consider the possibility of going to a spiritual retreat. I mean, totally absurd. However, hypothetically speaking, if you encountered such a person here, you have to stay really conscious and not react emotionally to anything this person says or does. So you have to, it's great practice. Now, this is, many of you will know him, Jack Cornfield, renowned writer of many spiritual books and spiritual teacher and meditation teacher. Right. That's a mountain. And a lovely formless presence. And that's where the books came out of. Jack has been bringing the essence of Buddhism to the West for the past 40 years through his books. And you were a Buddhist monk for a while in Thailand. And then, how many years were you a Buddhist monk?
I was there initially for about 5 years, and then I've gone back at different periods.
Yes. And if you haven't read any of his books, many of you will have. I'm just rereading Wise Heart. And one book I haven't read yet, but it has a wonderful title. It's After the Ecstasy, the Laundry, and which of course is about incorporating presence or mindfulness, as it's called in the Buddhist tradition, incorporating it into everyday life rather than just experiencing it in a meditation setting or meditative environment where you can go and then you have to go back into daily life. You have to bring it in there. Mindfulness is the term that, of course, is used in the Buddhist tradition. I don't use the word because, although I respect it, because it kind of implies that your mind is full. I don't know who first came up with it in a What is the original Pali or Sanskrit word that has been translated as mindfulness?
The Pali word is sati, S-A-T-I, and the very best Buddhist scholar that I know, a man named Analayo who lives in Hamburg, Germany, says that the closest translation to sati that he would give in English is presence.
Oh. But it's too late now because everybody...
And mindfulness has become a kind of industry, there's mindfulness in education, and it's a good thing. And mindfulness, there's all this wonderful neuroscience. Another translation that I like a lot, and we talked about a moment ago, is loving awareness, which has both the quality of presence, of awareness, and also somehow weds or gives the sense that we can rest in love, that love and awareness actually are the same.
Yes. Metta is another word. Loving kindness is sometimes translated as there are metta meditations where we send out loving kindness to your surroundings. The meditation that you teach mainly is called vipassana, which is to do with bringing awareness into the body. Is that right? Maybe later on you can give us a little taste of it towards the end. So can you say a bit more about what vipassana is?
Yeah, so vipassana is a Pali Sanskrit word that means basically to see clearly. And the primary practice of it is mindfulness or loving awareness. And it's generally established, although not always, first in the body, partly because there's this line from James Joyce where he wrote, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body, that characterization, that somehow we're so lost in our thoughts that a first step in coming into presence is to recognize that there's this body and breath that are actually present here and now, and that the body experience is a here and now experience. And then from awareness or loving awareness of body and presence, then it becomes possible to first notice the rivers of feelings and thoughts and so forth, and then to actually become the space of awareness, the knowing, that to recognize that there's experience and there is also the knowing of experience. So that's kind of, there you have it. You don't have to go to the Himalayas or, travel all the way. That's the essence of it.
Yes.
Save you airfare.
I also talk about that as, although the meditation is very structured, and when I talk about inner body awareness, it's the same thing, it's in an unstructured way. So, for example, as we speak now, I could invite everybody here, while we listen, to actually have some awareness in the inner energy field of their body. As you have it now, I have it now, you can have it now, and I call that sometimes an anchor for presence, to have awareness in the inner energy field of the body. And you have plenty of awareness left for sense perception, sensory perception. So a very quick way, I would say, you would probably agree, of getting out of continuously being trapped in the movement of thought is to consciously decide to direct awareness into the body, and then look around, and you can then give some people the first taste of being able to have sensory perception without the continuous involuntary interference of conceptualization and judgment. So you can look around you, feel the energy field. We can do it now, and I'm doing now an unstructured body awareness meditation. Later on, Jack is going to do with us a slightly more structured. So right now, just as you listen, feel the energy throughout your body. It's easy, and then you don't have unnecessary stuff that you add mentally to this moment. That's the Vipassana. Then has been around for a long time. It is possible, that was actually one of the original meditations taught by the Buddha.
It's believed so.
Yeah.
It's, of course, you get history and myth and so forth, you never know, but it's certainly been taught for thousands of years, yes.
Yes. And of course, the breath awareness was also taught by the Buddha.
Yeah.
And breath awareness is a big part of Vipassana.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the point in doing it isn't to become a good breather particularly, or to have particular special kind of breath. It's just what you're saying, Eckhart. It's to use the ever-changing life flow of the body of breath to just invite presence, and to be. If you're trying to control the breath, you already start to struggle and suffer. But if you realize, it breathes itself, and in fact the world starts to breathe itself more as you feel it, it invites that quality of presence or loving awareness through the breathing. And one of the beautiful things is that as people deepen in their ability to be quiet, for the mind to quiet and the breath to open, then there comes quite naturally a lightness and a joy very often that is just innate in us when we're not fixated in past and future.
Yes. So breath is also thousands of years old, also breath being a term similar to, I just talked a while ago about the sky, heavens, or emptiness. Breath is also something that has no form as such, and this is why traditionally it's a word that sometimes means spirit, breath, and why in the German language, for example, the word to breathe is atmen, which goes back to Sanskrit.
Yes.
Atman, the spirit within.
Or to inspire in English, the same thing. Exactly.
Yes. this mind-made sense of self is also much more focused on the negative than the positive. To be free, you awaken to who you are beyond your history and your life situation. We have examined the brain. We know quite a bit about the brain, but in reality we know very, very little. Scientists don't even know what is a thought, what is the material, physical representation of a thought in the brain. Nobody knows. Where is that memory that when I was 15 years old, I fell off my bicycle and hurt my leg, and I still remember that. How does this memory survive in the molecular structure of my brain, plus a million other memories? Where do they hide in my brain as little molecules where I fall off my bicycle? These are the molecules of this memory, and then at some point the molecules pop up again. What is the relationship between thought and the physical brain? What is the relationship between the physical brain and consciousness? Mainstream science will tell you that most of them, there are few who are beginning to doubt that the mainstream narrative. It will tell you that consciousness, if they even mention the word, most of the time they don't even talk about it because they have no idea what it is, and you can't examine it under a microscope. And when you cut open the brain, you will not find consciousness. In fact, when you cut open the brain, you will not find nothing of you. Little traces, perhaps, but nothing, not a thought, not a single thought, no consciousness, your memories, nothing will be found. You are 99% of who you are is invisible. It does not exist in the physical realm. Only your physical body. But who you are, your thoughts, your emotions, and the underlying consciousness, it's all invisible. That's why there's a lovely, I believe it is a little work of literature from, it could be the Little Prince or something like one of those works in French. There's a beautiful phrase, what is essential is invisible to the eye. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Beautiful and very, very true. But that means all the things that are essential in human life, of course, love, joy, a sense of aliveness, all your emotions, all your thoughts, they are invisible to the eye. Consciousness is invisible to the eye, which means you cannot find it with your senses. You can't see it or touch it. So when you look at a person, all you see is the outer body, the physical form. And even of that you only see the skin. If you penetrate it just the tiny bit beyond the skin, you would be shocked at what you would see. Just imagine no skin, all you see is then the organs of the body. Oh my God. And that is underneath this very thin layer of skin. When you're looking at a human, but all that is the tiniest part of who you actually are. And that's what's left for a short period of time when you so-called die. All the things that you are not, the physical vehicle, is still left. Not for long, because then it disintegrates. But that's what left, and you will be gone. The body is still there. The essence of, not just the essence, your entire being is invisible to the eye. So even the greatest microscope cannot figure out all the aspects even of your personality, let alone the deeper levels of your being. So the big question about consciousness is, what is the relationship between the physical brain and consciousness? Mainstreams, undoubtedly there is a relationship. There's no doubt about that. If you hurt the physical brain, you will lose consciousness. That's a conventional expression. As I often say, if a brick falls on my head, hopefully by saying it, I'm not manifesting it right now. If a brick falls on my head, I will not be able to continue to speak. Now, is that proof that consciousness is produced by the brain? Many people will tell you that that is proof that consciousness is produced by the brain, and the conventional expression is consciousness is a byproduct or an epiphenomenon of mind act, of the chemical soup in the brain. Many scientists actually deny that consciousness even exists. I don't know where they're going with that, because to deny that consciousness exists, you need to have consciousness. And they don't want to go there because it's so unknown. They realize they cannot dissect it. So it's better to leave it alone and to say, only we still live in a materialistic age. Materialism in its philosophical and deeper meaning doesn't mean that you're interested in money. Materialism in the deeper meaning means that you believe that physical matter, that everything in this world can be explained with reference to physical matter, atoms, molecules, and basically matter. Of course, if you go more deeply into physics, materialism disappears because you realize that matter is a kind of illusion. There is no matter. If you go deep into the atomic structure and beyond, you realize there's nothing. This, what I perceive as matter, is just rapid movements of atoms and molecules, giving me the illusion that this is matter. And the same in my body. Ultimately, there is no matter. And yet, there's still, within conventional science, the belief that the universe is matter. It can be explained with reference to matter. So, does the brain produce consciousness? The other possibility is that the brain receives consciousness and channels consciousness into a particular form that then creates your experience of the world and creates you. That consciousness is the organizing principle behind the formation of the brain, in the same way that a radio or a television does not produce the program that you watch. I can destroy the television set that happens to be showing an orchestra playing the Ninth Symphony, and then I destroy it. Have I destroyed the Ninth Symphony? No, it's no longer transmitting, it's no longer functioning as a receiver. So science will come to that realization, and there are already some scientists who have enough courage to question conventional interpretations, and it's usually scientists who are approaching retirement age, because before reaching retirement age, it would be too destructive for their career to go outside the mainstream interpretation. But once you reach retirement, you've got nothing to lose. You can speak out, and so that's a good thing. So the greatest mystery in the entire universe is not the infinity of space, or magnificent as that is, or the infinity of subatomic space, the macrocosm and the microcosm. That's mysterious enough, and we know little about it. But the greatest mystery of all is the fact that the universe is conscious. That is so incredible. The universe is conscious. How do I know that? Well, it's self-evident. I'm conscious. If I'm conscious, it means the universe is conscious. I am the universe. The universe. So that is the self-evident thing, the one thing that you cannot question, the absolute truth, perhaps the only thing that you cannot question, the thing that Descartes was looking for when he was asking himself, the French philosopher Descartes, a long time ago. He came at the end of the Middle Ages, when they had all kinds of absurd ideas of how many angels can dance on the pin of a needle, and kind of little strange mental structures built up. And he said, we must do away with this. What are the things that we can know for sure? Because we cannot know for sure how many angels are able to dance on the point of a needle. And so he's asking questions. And then he came to, as I mentioned in The Power of Now, and as you all know, he came to the conclusion that the one thing that I cannot doubt is that I am, because I am thinking. I think, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum in Latin. Je pense donc je suis. I'm just showing off, of course. Now, he was thinking all the time. He did not realize that thinking is an aspect, a manifestation of consciousness. So if he had waited a few more years, perhaps he could have gone more deeply within and realized, even when I am not thinking, and even more when I am not thinking, I am. When my thinking ceases, I am more fundamentally myself. Once you know that also, it's the end of fear. Because there nothing can be destroyed. So it's wonderful practice. That's your practice. It doesn't matter where you practice. Wherever you are in your life, you practice. Every situation, every moment is the two dimensions. And that's the end of fear comes with that. Fear being a normal human condition for most people, sometimes buried under something else. Fear in its many manifestations, nervousness, tension, anxiety, anger comes out of fear. Stress really is a form of fear. Many forms of fear, quite normal. Why? That's all you know. That's fear. You don't know that. Once you know that also, it's the end of fear. Because there nothing can be destroyed. That's why the Course in Miracles starts, which is all you need to know, the prologue, the first before it all starts. It says this course can be summarized in the following words. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Nothing real can be threatened, and that is here, because nothing unreal ultimately exists in the world of form. The form is ultimately not real in itself. Nothing unreal exists. Herein, which means knowing that, lies the peace of God. God, of course, is the formless, timeless, eternal, unmanifested, that is both within and beyond the world. Some of you, as I mentioned earlier, are able to step out of their mind, and you can practice that through a conscious choice. Be present. Nothing to think about right now, just be present. Wow. You don't carry your history with you when you're present. Your life situation. I use that word in Power of Now, very important. Your life situation, everybody has one. Past, future, relationships, job, health, finances, where you live, what happens to you, and all your life situation. You have a life, you're here with, you have a life situation, of course you do. But you also have, it's not that you have a life, you are life itself. And when your life situation is all you know about yourself, which is another way of putting, that's all you know, then you miss life. No, you're very good at dealing with your life situation, but you miss life. You do all the right things, but it never really gets you anywhere because you missed life. Life is now, and life is not in the doing. Life is in the being, now. Step out of thinking into alert stillness, if you can. And also, another way is not to completely believe in every thought that comes into your head. Realize it's a thought. It's a position. It's a judgment. Not completely identified with it. It's a story that you are telling yourself. It's amazing how many stories people tell themselves in their head. Many are completely distorted. It's not the reality, it's the story, it's how you see the reality. The reality usually is much more simple and more benign than the story. One of the early lessons in A Course in Miracles says you're supposed to look at things around you in the room and say, nothing that I see in this room means anything. This table doesn't mean anything. This glass doesn't mean anything. This hand doesn't mean anything. This floor doesn't mean anything. Now, what does that lesson mean? It doesn't mean anything. What it means is, it's attempting to erase the continuous conceptualization of reality, like scribblings on a blackboard. Because whatever you think it means is a concept in your mind. And if you deny the continuous and compulsive conceptualization of reality, it's like erasing the conditioning of your mind. And coming to the place where the Dalai Lama is, don't know. So this lesson in A Course in Miracles, all it's teaching is to come to the place of spacious emptiness, alertness. No longer trapped in conceptual thinking. Doesn't mean anything. And of course, that's another, you're moving into a different dimension. By living in this way, it's just, you inhabit, suddenly life opens up. And all the narrowness that the mind had imposed on it dissolves. And life becomes spacious, because you found the space within. There's suddenly a spaciousness to life, and not a threatening place anymore. What's life going to do? Where's this next threat coming from? And again, the same thing, for example, there's an entire spiritual teaching based on denying the reality of your story. And Byron Katie's teachings is based on the simple fact of denying your story. How do I know? Do I really know that this is true? No, I can't really know that. So it takes you to the same place where the Dalai Lama is. Don't know. So it's a wonderful thing if you can enter that not knowing, and then, but it's only not knowing from the viewpoint of the conceptual mind. You're actually connected with a deeper intelligence, unconditioned, and if you really need to know something, it comes. But it comes out of the spaciousness of not knowing. Well, it's a little bit like jumping off a cliff and then seeing if you can fly. To the ego, it's a little bit like that. The ego says, don't go there, because the ego has worked it all out. It explains the whole, it has its philosophy of life. It might be very defective, limiting philosophy, but it has some kind of philosophy of life. Every person has their story through which they interpret reality. And usually it's not a pleasant work of fiction. But at least you think you know. It gives you some illusory foothold. And of course the ego thinks, if I let go of that, I won't know anything anymore. Which in a way is true, but not completely true. In a deeper sense, is you only let go of a distortion of reality created by the conditioned mind, which is part of the collective human mind in its present state of evolution. And so the collective mind, of which your mind is part, has created this human-made world, which is full of problems, and they seem to be, they pop out one after another. When you think one thing is better now, suddenly, oh God, now it's the economy, and then it's that, and then it's that. Another war. And so anything that you do, let's stick with spiritual teacher, because some of you, I know some of you are already spiritual teachers in whatever capacity. Perhaps you're a therapist, perhaps you're working with people in some capacity, and many others of you are destined to become spiritual teachers. It's either directly or indirectly, either formally or non-formally. Of course you're destined because the world desperately needs awakening and awakened humans. And so a danger, no matter where you are, but right now we're just talking about becoming a spiritual teacher or being a spiritual teacher in whatever way, anything that becomes a conceptual sense of self means the ego is coming in through the back door. And so, is it not true then that at this moment I am a spiritual teacher? Yes, but only in the sense that it's a function. And while this function is happening right here and now, I could say, I'm a spiritual teacher. But when I walk off this stage and out the door, if I then carried a mental image of myself as a great spiritual teacher, I would be walking like that. And of course, everybody else would be inferior in my mind. And without knowing it, I would be walking around with a huge ego. And sooner or later, the ego would contaminate or obstruct my ability to teach. It could contaminate the teaching with egoic falsehood, or it could completely block the intuitive teaching that happens when you, which means the ego, when you get out of the way. When you get out of the way, something that transcends the limited you, I call that sometimes the surface I, that gets out of the way, and then the deep I emerges as the unconditioned consciousness, and it can use your mind. And that's the way to ultimately use your intelligence in a way that no longer puts the intelligence in the service of madness. So, being a spiritual teacher is a function. When I go away from here, I need to immediately relinquish a mental image, a narrative in my mind that tells me who I am. That is a conceptual sense of self. But of course, this not only applies to spiritual teachers, it applies to anybody in any situation. Where do you derive your sense of self from? What is it that gives you your sense of self? I know, of course, that on a purely surface level, spiritual teacher works. Can solve problems when you can tell a person who says, "What do you do?" You could say this and that. Usually, I don't say spiritual teachers. If I go to a foreign country, and sometimes at the border or at the airport, the customs say, "What do you do? Why are you here?" And usually I say, "I'm a writer, I'm an author." Okay, that solves the problem. I don't advise you to do it either, saying, "I have no conceptual identity." They probably won't let you in. We don't want people who have no conceptual identity. No. The question then is, how do you let go of deriving your sense of identity, which is very important in everybody's life? Sense of identity after food and shelter is probably the most important thing in your life. It starts even little children. They very soon they look for an increasing sense of I. There's a compulsion in every human to look for a satisfying sense of self, of identity. It starts with a little child that says, well, maybe it starts with the moment the parent tells the child, you are Mary, you are John. John? John? Yes, John. John? Oh, John. Hi, John. What's your name? After a while, the child, John. That's the beginning. And it can't be avoided. You cannot tell a child, no, you're not John, you're nobody. It has to grow, and then John or Mary have a toy. And then another child tries to take it away. Ah, it's mine, my toy, mine. Concept. It's a mental concept. You associate something in the external with who you are. The toy becomes a mental form, the sort of my toy. There is self within this thought of my toy, and when the toy is taken away, the pain does not arise because the toy is taken away, because probably a few minutes later the child loses interest in the toy anyway. The pain arises because something is pulling at your sense of who you are, mine, and that's painful. And that's only the beginning of it. And then it grows. The conceptual self that associates with things, that identifies with things, comes not only with things. These are all thought for the thing becomes a thought form. It's mine, and then you derive your sense of self from it. And you need to compare with others, because the ego seeks superiority. You derive your identity from having, in some area of your life, the ego needs some kind of superiority to feel it is somebody. So I'm mentioning this because it's important to recognize it in yourself, because it can be a huge obstacle to the awakening, and it can deceive you, and it can come in in the most unexpected places. And this is why I mentioned spiritual teacher. So you identify with, then of course it's not only possessions. Body is very important in the egoic identification. Body, physical body, is the source of suffering for many people and the source of pride for others. And then there's a whole range of people who are in between. Sometimes they feel good about their body and sometimes they don't. You can read magazines and so on. They all talk about your body, your body, your body. So of course you identify with the physical form. And if it's stronger or better looking than other bodies, it is food for the ego. But if it's not as good looking or well formed as other bodies, it's still food for the ego if it makes you suffer. So it's not that only the great things are ego, but also the sense of having less than somebody else is ego. Well, the only way the body can become stronger if it experiences being challenged. And there may come a point, at first the body doesn't like it, but then, because it's being challenged, it responds to the challenge, and then at some point, you may be able to sense an influx of energy into the body, physical energy. And then, what before was difficult for the body can actually become a very exhilarating thing when you feel the added a new energy flow coming into the body, but it's only coming in because there was a demand being made. The life was becoming so difficult for the body, so to speak, that the body was making a demand for more energy, and then something responded and gave the body more energy. But if life had not become difficult for the body, it would never have happened. And then after a while, the body gets, the muscles grow to some extent, even without steroids, the muscles grow, and you may not become Arnold, but the body gets stronger. And life operates on a universal, larger scale in the same way. If things don't get difficult, no evolution happens. Wow. Which means it is very unlikely that anybody awakens spiritually from within their comfort zone. Oh no. And of course, people often are very reluctant to be taken out of their comfort zone. Some people create challenges. They want to achieve this or that, or later they want to awaken spiritually. They might go to a meditation boot camp, not this one, but you can go to a meditation retreat such as Vipassana, where you have to meditate like 10 hours a day. Another 4 hours to go, I can't take anymore. Why did I ever come here? This is totally crazy. What are these people doing here? I know of somebody who was on such a retreat, and after the second or third day, she became so unhappy that she said, "How can I get out of here?" There was no public transport, and somebody had driven her there and then gone back, so there was no transport, and would have taken hours to walk through. And She got on her cell phone and asked for a helicopter to fly her out. But none was available. And so she stayed. And then on the fourth or fifth day, she experienced, for the first time, surrender. And she realized, if I stop complaining mentally, I might still feel aches and pains in my body because we are sitting for so long, but otherwise it's actually fine if my mind stops. Well, that's a breakthrough, but it only happened because things became very difficult. However, you don't need to see necessarily, if you do, that's fine, but you don't need to seek out a very difficult situation. Life will do it to you anyway. If it's good to challenge yourself on different levels, you can challenge yourself not only physically, you can challenge yourself also by having a certain goal that you want to achieve in this world. That's part of being here, and then work towards it. That's a challenge. And there are some people who don't want to do that. Say no. They want to remain in their comfort zone. Did you read the thing a couple of days ago? Well, hopefully not, because you don't listen to the news. But I do, just in case there's something important that I need to tell you about. And so there were two important items that I just want to mention now. One is the Russia investigation. That's the big news. Has been for a long time. The other is that there was a 30-year-old man who lived in his parents' house and refused to leave. He didn't want to get a job. He's 30 years old, and the parents took him to court so that he would leave their house. And they won the court case. The judge decided that he definitely needs to leave. And then he was interviewed and he was complaining about it. Life was becoming so difficult for him. This is an extreme example of somebody who refuses to challenge himself in any way whatsoever. Not that he was even meditating, no, he was sitting there, drinking beer and watching television and games. And then, of course, eventually, life will challenge you, where you may not, at least you have a choice. If you challenge yourself through this or that, you have a choice. If you refuse to do anything, to try anything, then life will choose something for you. You may not like it. As somebody I know very well said to me, a relative of mine, said he had no ambition whatsoever, and had a job but didn't want to go beyond it in any way, just a simple job. And he said, I don't know if he was serious or joking, but it was the truth. He said, I've never failed at anything because I've never tried anything. So you maybe have heard the Latin famous dictum. I don't know who first created it, must be some Roman philosopher. Per aspera ad astra, which translates as through adversity to the stars. Adversity could also be translated as difficulty. Through adversity, through difficulty, through suffering, you could say, through adversity to the stars, which means, of course, as obviously the wisdom embedded in this is that you only grow through adversity, through difficulties, just like the body. And you don't have to seek it out, as I said before. Some people do, and there is a tradition in many spiritual traditions, in Christianity and many other religions, probably all. There is a very ancient tradition by which the practitioner seeks out suffering rather than tries to avoid suffering.